Great. So those of you joining, welcome to the call today. Very excited to have my co-host. Welcome to your first call, Lucy Fernandez. Thank you very much for joining us and joining our team. Very happy to have you.
It's my absolute pleasure. I've lurked in the community conversation calls for the last several years, and then I've presented once or twice. But yeah, kind of getting to co-host and share space with all these like awesome people and these really important subjects. It's really I'm super stoked.
Awesome. We have a question of the day floating around for those of you joining, so feel free to drop it in the message. What does your pet do that makes you feel safe? And feel free to share where you're from or where you're joining us from. We've got some people from all across the country and looking forward to some people joining us outside of that. So we've got an amazing topic for you today, but it's something that we want you to know some things about. Lucy, will you help us through that?
Yes, absolutely. I apologize. I think I missed the part where I'm supposed to introduce myself. I run the Austin Pets Alive Positive Alternatives to Shelter Surrender program in Austin, Texas. We support the entire state of Texas in helping people keep their pets out of the shelter and preferably with them in their homes. So just a little bit of background there. But our topic for today, we're going to go ahead and we're going to be going and talking about domestic violence and specifically how we approach the survivors. And I apologize, the full title of it. Understanding domestic violence to better support survivors and their pets. So we're going to go ahead and kind of get into this sensitive subject matter. There's going to be the trigger warning and content warning so that, everybody's kind of holding space and respecting, obviously the sensitive topic of it. I'll go ahead and it includes references to domestic violence and some viewers may find difficult or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised if your loved one or experienced domestic violence. Help is available via the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, 7233. Unless explicitly stated by a presenter, we are not licensed mental health professionals. The information provided in these sessions should not be considered medical or psychological advice. If you are seeking mental health support or treatment, we recommend consulting with a qualified healthcare provider. Always prioritize professional guidance for any health-related decision, and we honor diverse forms of healing and encourage individuals to explore care that aligns with their values, culture, and personal well-being.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're going to keep having some information in the chat for those listening. So we just want to make sure that we let people know what the topic is today so that you can engage where you're most comfortable. We have a couple things to go for reminders. So reminder that there is no call next Monday for 10/14. And we do have some grant winners we'd like to announce. So Kelly will join us to let us know about the September grant winners. For those of you who are receiving, if you're here on the call, normally we do ask you to share. If you want to say something, please be very brief. We've got a lot of content to get through today, but congratulations ahead of time. Kelly?
Hey, thanks, Ray. And hello, Lucy, and welcome. I am excited to announce our giveaway winners today. So let me share my screen. All right. Can I get a thumbs up from Lucy or Ray? Awesome, awesome. So let me, ta-da! So we have several winners to announce. We're giving away, or announcing rather, our weekly community conversations, giveaways, our Maddie's Pet Forum monthly giveaway, and a fun surprise and delight grant to one of our top Maddie's Pet Forum contributors this quarter. So our first giveaways, we have two winners of $2,500 each for our community conversation. And that is Susan Levitt of American Maltese Association Rescue and Amber Mingan of Chattahoochee Humane Society. For Maddie's Pet Forum, the monthly giveaway, our winner is Lauren Green at Humane Society of the Palouse. And our Surprise and Delight quarterly giveaway, that winner is Dara Edmonds of Central Florida Community Pet Clinic. So congratulations to all the winners. If you are on the call and would like to say hi real quick, you can. Otherwise, you can put a hello in the chat or go to the thread, the community conversation thread on Maddie's Pet Forum and introduce yourself there too.
Hello,
Wonderful.
I'm here. I'll be fast.
Hi,
I'm
Dara.
Dara Edmonds, Central Florida Community Pet Clinic. And I just want to say thank you so much. I love Maddie's Fun because I feel like you guys see the little people too. We're very small, so we don't get a lot from some of the other organizations that do grants. So I just really appreciate you guys and want to say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for all you do.
Hey, I'll be quick too. This is Amber Minjan. I'm from Chattahoochee Humane Society. We also are a super small facility. We only had 16 kennels here when I first started. We've now got about 36 up and running, but we are just so appreciative because every little bit helps us. And just thank you guys for all that you do and just super appreciative of this. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Amber, and my apologies for mispronouncing your name.
I'm Sue Levitt, and I'm with American Maltese Association Rescue. We're foster based, we're all volunteer, and we've been around since 2012. We're breed specific. And while no one thinks people are going to give up those cute little dogs, they really do. And we get them endlessly. I love Maddie's. I've learned so much. I think that most of the people I work with say, oh, here she goes again, another Maddie's Fund idea. But it's really helped the conversations. Everything has come through. I've done a college course in marketing with you guys. So I want to thank you. And this is like the icing on the cake that we desperately need. Thank you.
Thanks
Well,
and
thank you, Susan.
Hi, I'm Catherine Horsey with with the Taos Humane Society. This is my second week on the job and my first week COVID-free. So the first week was oh so very fun. Thanks for having us. It's Stray Hearts Animal Shelter and Taos Humane Society.
Gotcha. Thank you. Congrats. Congrats again to Susan, Amber, Lauren, and Dara. So much wonderful people joining the call and able to share in those rewards. So thank you so much, Maddie's, for all that you do with that. For national updates, if you guys could do me a favor and put them all in the chat so that everyone can see them, feel free to add those in there. Don't forget to register for this week's drawing, and don't forget to share your answer to the question of the day if you haven't, of what does your pet do to make you feel safe? So without further ado, it is my absolute honor to introduce our speaker to you today. Janelle Griffith is going to share a topic that is sensitive, so feel free to review the disclaimer warnings in your chat. And this is about understanding domestic violence for all of us, so to better support survivors and their pets, whether that's us or ourselves, people we know or people we don't know. So very excited to get to hear from someone I consider compassionate, empathetic, wonderful, brilliant, and knowledgeable in all of the things that make this topic difficult. She's studied and has her master's in public health. She has worked with multiple nonprofits throughout the years and is currently working in a consulting capacity. She has worked in all types of areas of social change, animal welfare, really focuses on the importance of the human-animal bond, and is one of those people that can just do everything, from program management protocols to nursing kittens every hour. She has saved countless lives, even though she won't say it, I'll say it for her. humans, animals of all kinds, and her success rate and for all of her work has just been exceptional. She is a voice for all of us, and she has a deep love for her own fur babies, especially her sweet beloved soul dog Dre, who just, even if he's not here, he fires through all of her work and lives on every day. So please join me in welcoming Janelle Griffith.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to get started. Can everybody see that? Are we good? Okay. Like I said, this is understanding domestic violence to better support pets and their survivors and their pets. My screen is off to the side where I'm seeing my presentation, but I want to be able to see everybody too. So I'm looking this way. At the bottom of the screen, you're going to see that's the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. It's going to be on every single slide. So if you need to go back to it and reference it, it's there. I always want to start with a trigger warning. This is obviously very sensitive subject to a lot of people, a lot of sensitive content that could be in this. There's a lot of more people than you probably think that are experiencing domestic violence. And a lot of times too, when we start getting into the depth of what domestic violence is and people have a better understanding of it, they start realizing, oh no, like I'm experiencing domestic violence, because most people think it's the physical aspect of domestic violence, the physical violence, but actually domestic violence goes far deeper than that. I also want to say that I talk about the subject very casually. It's not because I think this is a casual subject. It's because I believe that this conversation should be in every realm. We should be talking about it with our friends, our family, our coworkers, everywhere. Domestic violence thrives in silence. And so the more we are silent about it, we don't talk about it, we don't speak about it, we don't have a better understanding of it, the more it thrives and the more it continues. So our objectives today are pretty clear. We're going to understand what domestic violence and family violence is. Domestic violence is an umbrella term. It encompasses family violence, intimate partner violence. It can encompass stalking, elder abuse, child abuse. It is an umbrella term. We're going to heavily focus on the understanding part, and there's a specific reason behind it. I truly believe, personally, if you don't have the in-depth knowledge of what domestic violence is, the patterns of abuse and the behavior, you cannot fully support a survivor, because this is where the blame game starts happening. This is where we misstep and we say the wrong thing. And this is where we might potentially put a survivor in danger. So this is important to understand the beginning parts of this, where this comes from, and the in-depth kind of thing before we can move on and talk about how to support someone experiencing domestic violence. And at the end, we're going to have considerations on helping survivors and their pets. It's not, I don't have a blueprint for you. It's not going to solve the world's problems. This is a really heavy topic, a big problem. And so it's going to encompass a lot of people coming together. There's a lot of really wonderful people already working on this, and it's just about amplifying it and continuing on. So, and apologize, I don't have a lot of time. This is like usually like a 2-hour presentation, so I'm gonna talk so fast. I always would like to start with the legal definition and the deeper definition. So there's a legal definition of what domestic violence is, and there's the actual social deeper definition of what truly domestic violence is. This is actually really important to understand, because the legal definition, a lot of people want to be like, well, call the police or sue them or do something. They can't. The legal definition is bound by law, right? Cops are bound by law. So when they show up, and you could see right there, it's mostly resulting in physical violence, right? They have to have some sort of physical evidence in order to arrest somebody, in order to prosecute, in order to do something. And I put a little asterisk there because every state actually has a different statute and definition. This is actually I'm in the state of Florida. This is the Florida definition of what domestic violence is. They're all pretty similar. However, there's a little caveats to each and every one of them in different states. Now, the deeper, more social definition of domestic violence, it's obviously really long, a lot longer than the legal version, but it's important to understand that, especially that first line. It's a pattern of behavior. I want to go back on that. It's a pattern of behavior in any type of relationship. And like I said, this is including family violence. This could be between a son and a mom. Domestic violence encompasses it all. But it's a pattern of behavior that is used by one partner or person to gain and maintain power and control over another person. A pattern of behavior. just some quick statistics, just to kind of show you how prevalent this is. This affects millions and millions and millions of people in the US alone. And that's not even including around the world. If we got into that, we'll probably be in the billions. But you could see 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. If you go through this room, I don't even remember how many people, 151, you just go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's how many people have experienced it. It is extremely prevalent. And this is why I talk about this all of the time. I just think that it's something that should be a part of every conversation. You can see some other statistics there. So they actually have been doing really good of adding more statistics, including trans and non-binary, which is wonderful because when I kind of first started, they didn't have a lot of statistics on that, but now they're kind of getting more reports in. You could see there's an increase of report of sexual abuse. And then also the most common age when intimate partner violence first is experienced is 18 to 24. I also kind of want to throw in a little bit of this is I don't know if anybody's heard those news reports, but a lot of people are saying that the younger generation are pushing back having families and opting to get pets. So if we kind of look at the correlation here, 18 to 24, 18 to 24 is also more opt to get pets instead of children. We have something that's going to be coming up the pipeline, right? We're going to experience more and more pets that are going to be needing help. So some US statistics, including pets in particular, 97% of respondents, this is between a survey that the National Domestic Violence Hotline did with Urban Resource Institute. It's really wonderful. It's on their website if you want to see more. 97% of respondents said that keeping their pets with them is the most important factor in deciding whether to seek shelter. It's interesting because I gave a presentation a little different because it was for domestic violence people. So I did a presentation at the Florida Domestic Violence Conference, and these are all human advocates. And I remember this one person saying to me, listen, I love my pets. My dogs are my family. But I'm just not understanding what you're coming from because I rather get the person safe first. And I told her, I completely understand that. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand we value human life first. But if you told me to leave my soul dog Dre behind in an abusive relationship, I would never do it. There is absolutely no way you would ever get me out of that home because I would never leave him because he was my entire world. And I emphasized that. I was like, people, I know that a lot of people understand and have that connection with their pets, but then there's some people where that's our everything. 48% of respondents feared that abusive partner would harm or kill their pets, and 29% that they already have harmed and killed. I don't even think there's a possible way to get the actual statistic of how many pets have died in a domestic violence situation. I have heard story after story after story after story of survivors saying that their abuser has killed their pet. So who can DV happen to and who abuses? Anybody. This is one of the most non-discriminatory acts of violence and abuse ever. It's across all religions, all races, ethnicities, genders, ages. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank accounts. It doesn't matter your educational status. It doesn't matter your political affiliation. You could be the most liberal person in the world and still be an abuser. Because at the end of the day, it's not about anything else except having power and control over another person. This is what gets really confusing a lot of times with people because they go, well, this so-and-so is such a wonderful coworker. I can never imagine them hurting their partner. But it's not about power and control over you. It's about power and control over their partner. At the core and center of it, this is where we emphasize and say this over and over and over and over again. It is about power and control over that individual. This is the power and control wheel. You can actually find this online. This is just an edited version from the Duluth. This is where it originally started way back, I want to say like the 60s, I can't remember exactly, where they started interviewing women. And back in the day, it was just women. They started interviewing women about their abusers and they started seeing patterns. So they created this power and control wheel. And you can see here on the power and control wheel, that center part is the power and control, right? Because at the core of it, that's what it is. On the outer ring is where you see physical and sexual violence, because all of the stuff in the middle is actually what you see first before you'll ever see any bit of physical or sexual violence. And a majority of people who've experienced domestic violence have never physically been harmed. So take that into account. Most people are not even physically harmed, but it's still domestic violence. It goes way deeper. We're going to go through this super fast, but you can kind of see that coercion and threats is a big one. Some people will threaten and say, like, if you leave me, plain and simple, I'll kill you. Someone will say, if you leave me, I'll kill myself. Intimidation, making gestures, making them afraid. There was a survivor who said that her husband, her abuser, would lay out all of the guns on the table and clean them and stare at her. Not a word was said, but she knew what that meant. You do anything that crosses me, you're dead. Isolation. This is one of the biggest ones that I feel like most people should really, really talk about, because isolation is an important part of maintaining that power and control over somebody. And when I say that is, if you are isolated from your friends and family and you don't have that support system, it becomes very difficult to believe yourself. And that part of this is making their abuser, the victim, confused. And if you don't have your friends and family to support you, it becomes even more confusing. And by the way, this is not something that happens, like you can't talk to your friends anymore. It's extremely subtle. It's, hey, you're a friend that you hang out with. Every time you guys go out, you get too intoxicated and I just fear for your safety. So now it's slowly sowing seeds of doubt into the relationships that you've built until that person, that abatterer, is the only person that is worthwhile and is going to take care of them. Emotional abuse, putting them down, making them feel bad about themselves, calling them names, making them think they're crazy. This is a terminology called gaslighting. A lot of people have probably heard this word. I have to go on a little bit of soapbox on this. I think that we talk about mental health so much now, and I think that's wonderful. But on the little caveat of that is now we've become so casual with certain words. We use them over in an abundance, and gaslighting is one of them. I've heard the term gaslighting be described in just the most basic way, like, that's not my coffee, they're gaslighting me about it. I'm like, okay. Gaslighting is psychological abuse. It is a tactic somebody uses to maintain power and control over another person. Gaslighting makes somebody question the reality, and remember that key word, pattern. They're going to continue to do it because they want to break down that person's mentality. Minimizing, denying, and blaming, they'll make light of everything. I will tell you, abusers never take responsibility. It's your fault I have to do this. If you didn't talk back to me, I wouldn't have to scream at you. If you didn't do XYZ, then I wouldn't have to do this. Using children and pets, that's a really, really, really big one. Just because there's separation does not mean that the children cannot be continued to use to maintain control over a survivor. Economic abuse, let's be honest, money make the world go round. What are you going to do without money? And it's very subtle. Once again, it's not, I control the money and you don't. It could be like that, but most of the time it's, oh, I'll take care of the finances, don't worry about it. Or even if the person works, oh, sometimes you can be a little frivolous with your spending. So let me handle this so that we make sure we pay all our bills and da. And next thing you know, that person has complete control over the money and you're not seeing where it goes. And how are you going to escape this relationship if you don't have any money? This is also another really big one that we hear love bombing. We talk about love bombing, and we're going to kind of go into that. But I think that this is part of a presentation I think that really needs to be emphasized whenever we talk about domestic violence. People always ask this question, oh my gosh, like I would never let somebody treat me like that. I don't understand how you could be with somebody like that. I want you to understand that it isn't always like that. Love and manipulation is a really big part of domestic violence. Love is used as manipulation. And honestly, love is the foundation that the abuse is built on. If you went on a first date and the guy or person said to you, hey, by the way, I'm going to belittle you every single day. I might physically harm you. I'm going to threaten you every day. I'm pretty sure most people are going to walk away and say, no second date. No, thank you. They're going to run. That's a logical thing to do, but that's not how this works. A lot of times abusers know exactly what they're doing and they come in, and the love bombing is, you were the most wonderful person I've ever met in my life. I have never met anybody like you. Oh my God, the connection that we have is something beautiful that I've never experienced before in my life. They want to move quick, right? Because that adds to the confusion. You've been on 2 dates and this person's like, I love you. And you're like, wait a minute, how do you love me? But then it's like, you're going to start questioning yourself, because you're like, am I going to reject somebody who's being really nice to me? And it's going to be all nice, all wonderful. And they'll always go back to the love. Even when that mask slips and they say something bad, it goes back to love. I'm so sorry I said that. I had a stressful day at work, and it builds. And they're going to almost appear like they idolize that victim. They're going to be like, this is the most wonderful person. I worship the ground that they walk on. They're so phenomenal. Oh my God, I love you. Because when the mask starts slipping and they start going into that abusive tactics and other behavior, it's going to confuse that person. Where's that nice, genuine, wonderful person that I was just talking to? Which brings me into charming, manipulation, and narcissism. I'm sorry, but the minute I hear somebody say that that person is charming, it is the most biggest red flag that I've ever heard in my life. When I hear charming, I'm like, because abusers who are master manipulators are extremely charming. They're charming when they're first grooming their victims. They're charming to everybody around them. Oh my gosh, when you meet them, they're probably going to be one of the nicest people you've ever met in your entire life. And you're like, wow, what a wonderful person. But that's part of their manipulation. I read by a psychologist was talking about domestic violence, and she said, they're master manipulators to the point where anybody who thinks that they couldn't be manipulated by them could be. That's how good at what they're doing. And it's narcissistic behavior, which this is another term, again, that is overused too much. Like everything is narcissism, but narcissism is a personality trait, or it can be a personality disorder. And it's really important to understand the true definition of narcissism before we start calling people narcissists. And this behavior is, again, this is where they don't take blame. Nothing is their fault. And they don't see what's wrong. And there's a wonderful person named Dr. Ramani. If you've never heard of her, she's like a psychologist, and she is like the queen of like talking about narcissism. And she will explain. And it's just wonderful to kind of learn all of that stuff from her. I want to point out too that nobody intends to be in an abusive relationship. Like I said, if abusers showed their true colors in the beginning, then nobody would be in an abusive relationship, right? We'd more than likely just avoid them and they just have each other, I guess. It is systematic behaviors. It is a part of that love, that manipulation. They see it as a tactic to get control. This is why it takes an average of 7 times for somebody to leave in an abusive relationship. This is called Love is Respect. You could find this. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but there is a difference between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive. And that's the other part too. I want to mention is just because somebody is unhealthy doesn't mean they're abusive. We have to be careful with those terms too, because if we want to make sure that we're helping somebody properly, if somebody is just like, well, they don't communicate with me, that doesn't mean that they're abusive. Right? We want to go back to the tactics that abusers are using to maintain power and control over another person. You could find that, you guys, yourself. It's really awesome. Even though I don't have a lot of time, I still want to take a pause break. This is pretty heavy. How's everybody feeling? Everybody want to take a deep breath in? We're going to move on. But please, if you're having trouble, you can always take a break. You can watch the recording later. You don't have to stay here. So the biggest question you always hear is, why not just leave? And I think people in animal welfare, we go, oh my God, animals don't have a choice, right? They can't open the door and walk away. But we see a person and we go, you have a choice. You can open the door and just walk away. And if there is one phrase that I want every single person on this planet to delete from their vocabulary, especially when talking about domestic violence, is just leave. Leaving is the most dangerous time for a person experiencing domestic violence. Most homicides occur when that person decides to leave. You cannot just leave. When an abuser realizes that they're losing that power and control over somebody, they don't know how to comprehend it. This is where they start getting really, really, really desperate. And people have reported that they have they'll have abusers who have never in their life been physically violent and still commit homicide because the person left. A lot of times when you see these news articles that say murder suicide, that's actually domestic violence. It's not murder suicide, it's domestic violence. If you dig deep into the article, it's always domestic violence. And it's always the same story. They decided to break up, they decided to leave, they said no more, it's enough, and that person murders them. So why do people stay? I mean, this list can go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. One of the biggest ones is fear, right? What will that person do to me if I leave? It's the fear of the unknown. What's going to happen if I leave? That person controls all my money. I'm locked in this house. Like, I don't have anything for myself. Where do I go? Hope. What did I say? Love is the foundation that this abuse is built on. And that person is going to be promising and promising and promising them a million things. I promise I'll get better. On the power and control, I forgot to say that, but it says that domestic violence is not an anger or substance use problem. And it's not, because once the substance abuse is gone, it doesn't mean that they will get better, because this is about power and control. But they have this hope that maybe if they stop drinking, they'll stop and they'll be better. Or maybe if they go to therapy, they'll be better. Shame. I'm going to get on my soapbox again about this one. Shame, they've interviewed a lot of survivors, and shame and embarrassment is actually one of the biggest barriers for survivors getting help. Because the first thing we do as people is want to put it back on that person for being in that abusive relationship. I have heard people say, this is another phrase to just completely eliminate, is I would never let somebody do that to me. You say that, like, if you get off this meeting and you're like, I heard what she said, yeah, yada, 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 yada. But if somebody did that to me, I'm gonna fight them. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. But what you're doing is the people around you who are probably experiencing domestic violence, you have just let them know it's their fault. When at the end of the day, we don't need to be questioning people about why they're being abused. We need to question people why they abuse. It is not okay to do something like that. And so we have to focus all of our attention on abusers, or they will continue to perpetuate harm and keep doing it. We have to make people feel safe enough to have this conversation so they can come out and say something. It is extremely difficult for a survivor to take that first step and say, this is happening to me. Financial reasons, obviously, money makes the world go around. Children, a lot of times people will say, well, what about the kids? You never know what's happening in that home. I've heard a lot of survivors say that the reason they stayed in that relationship was because the abuser was also abusing their children. And if they separated, the judge, and I will tell you, the judge most of the time will give custody to that other parent. It doesn't matter what kind of record they have. They will try to give custody to that parent. They want to stay so that way they can see what's happening in the home and protect their children. But if they separated, then their children will be away from them and they won't be able to do it. Pets, I think pets kind of just lump in the children on the same thing there. Love, like I said, there was still love there. Nowhere to go, culture, religion. Undocumented is a really big one. There is a ton of people who unfortunately will bring people into this country, take all of their records and documentation away, and they have nowhere to go. A person with a disability, if you're a person with a disability and your abuser is your caregiver, how do you leave? Language barriers. I do want to point out that domestic violence hotline has translation services. So just always point that out to people. It's every language. Rural is a really big one too. If you're 50 miles away from the nearest domestic violence shelter, how are you going to get help? Senior race is a big one too. I want to say that statistically, they try to say that it affects Black and Hispanic communities more. But I also want to add this little caveat of, or are they just getting arrested more? There's also this other component where you also don't want to call the police because yes, your abuser is horrible, but you also still have that love and hope. And if you call the police, there's a chance they could get shot by the police. LGBTQIA+, what if your family has disowned you and you don't have family to go to and run to? What if your abuser is the reason how you're getting your hormones paid for? You can't just walk away from something like that. And honestly, at the end of the day, sometimes it's just safer to stay. They know the minute they walk out that door, they're done. So how do you help? This is actually a whole presentation on its own, and I would give a whole presentation on being a better bystander all on its own, but we're going to put it on one slide. One of the biggest things I want people to understand is you're not the hero. That's really hard for people to hear, right? Because if we see that happening to a coworker, a loved one of ours, the first thing we want to do is kick down that door and swoop in there and save them. But you're not the hero of the story, and you can't be the hero of the story. The survivor is the hero of this story. Our job is to be the sidekick, and every now and then maybe we'll throw a ninja star, I don't know. But we're gonna be the sidekick of the story, and they're the hero. We can't do this. Sometimes it'll make it worse. Some people go, well, I'm just gonna go beat up the abuser. Well, now you have a reason that abuser has a paperwork, right? Legal paperwork, say that I was abused. It can cause more problems. I always say the first thing people should do is to tune into yourself. Tap into your deepest throes of empathy, because if you're not ready to have this conversation with the most empathetic approach, you're not ready. No, it's going to be uncomfortable at times. Obviously, this is a heavy topic. Most of the time we're talking about intimate partner relationships, and nobody wants to be in someone else's relationship. Also know you're not alone though. The domestic violence hotline, you can actually call them if you're just trying to help somebody you know. They provide services for people who are trying to help others. Believe them. That's in all caps for a reason. If we sow seeds of doubt, right? Because sometimes we know the abuser. If we say something like, wow, I just can't see John doing something like that. You've just told that survivor you don't really believe them. I know you're processing it, questioning it, because you're just like, this is heavy, this is a lot going on. But this is the one time we're going to keep that to ourselves and just say, I am so sorry this is happening to you. Make the time and don't force anybody. And when I say make the time, make the time. If somebody is taking the leap to finally come out and say, this is happening to me, and you're like, oh, sorry about that, I gotta go though, I gotta go to lunch, and you just walk away, that's crushing, right? There's always that phrase everybody likes to say, if you need anything, just let me know. And then you call that person and they're like, sorry, I'm busy. Make the time, have that communication. Hey, just so you know, I work 9 to 5. I can't have my phone. 5:30, I'm all yours though. I could talk, we can have a phone call, we can do whatever you need to do. But just so you know, during 9 to 5, I may not have my phone. So if you reach out to me, then I may not be able to have a conversation. And don't force anybody into anything in any situations. Remember, you're not the hero. You're not going to save the day. Don't push. Use your I statements. This is a big one for pretty much anything. I statements. I am worried about your safety. Not, you're not worried about your safety? You're not, so-and-so is doing this? Why would you let so-and-so do this? I'm concerned about some of the behavior that I've seen. This is eliminating accusatory tone. Focus on behaviors and not the person. I always say mimic how the survivor talks. If they're just like, Joe Schmo did this, and you're like, you mean your abuser? It's going to make them feel worse because they're still confused about everything that's happening. Mimic the same language. And it's not about attacking a person. It's just saying we don't accept that type of behavior. Validate their feelings, and I mean all of them. It's going to be a whirlwind, right? There's still love, especially if they have kids together. There's all of this stuff that's going to come with it. It's going to be like, I love them, I hate them, I still want to be with them, but I don't like them. I don't know. All of those feelings are valid. It's an extremely confusing. What an abuser does is purposely infiltrate somebody's mentality to confuse them. Listen without judgment, criticism, or interrupting. This is your time where we're not going to be, you know, that knock knock joke, the interrupting cow. We're not going to be the interrupting cow on this. I know a lot of people listen so they could speak, but we're not going to speak. We're going to listen to everything this person has to say. Focus on safety. Safety, 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 safety. Every safety plan is going to be different because everybody's living situation is different. Focus on safety and let them lead and let them choose. You're not the hero, remember. They need to choose, because if you come in and you say, we're going to do this, 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 and this, what are you doing? You're doing exactly what the abuser did. Take away all of their control over their own personal life. This is why we provide options. So kind of going into more about what we can do working together is work together, right? Build our relationships. Reach out to your local domestic violence organization. They've been doing this a long time. A lot of times they know. You don't have to do something big. Start small, right? Build it from there. Maybe it's just you want to help with a food pantry for pets. So that way survivors get the food that they need for their pets and all of the supplies. Because don't forget, we think cats and dogs, but a lot of people have horses. There's a big bird community. There's millions of people who own birds. We have reptiles. Think more than just cats and dogs as well when we're talking about building supplies and offering things. Offer animal services and assistance. If we're all animal welfare people here, we know something like, hey, a dog maybe shouldn't be in a kennel run for 6 months because the dog can deteriorate without any type of enrichment. And one of the domestic violence place I worked at had an on-site pet place, but the kennel bank was so tiny. I was like, how is a 60-pound dog going to fit in there? So that's where we can kind of work together, right? And exchange our knowledge. Share resources as nonprofits. What do we want to do? My money, my money. Don't touch my money. Everybody needs their money to have our organization. But here's the thing. We have money that could go specifically towards pets, and they have money that could go specifically towards humans. So if we could put those two together, we can share the resources. And understand there needs to be options. This is how you bring everybody to the table. There's a lot of wonderful organizations already talking and working on things. You've heard of Red Rover. There's Red Rover. There's Praline's Backyard. You can go follow her. She's talking about domestic violence already. There's a lot of wonderful organizations that are doing this, but we also have to remember we have to have options. The point of helping survivors is options and letting them choose. We can't just have a kenneling system, for instance, right? Something is better than nothing. Don't get me wrong. Something is better than nothing. So start with something that's better than nothing. But what about, for me, like, for instance, my dog could never go in a kennel. He'd probably bite somebody. And I can't leave him for an 8-hour workday and then leave him in a kennel for that long. So what's my next option? Which brings me to considerations. Things to think about when you sit down and you start having these conversations is understand that there's breed and size restrictions on housing. And that includes, depending on the type of housing that you have, even at domestic violence places, because of insurance. What is the big dog that nobody wants? The pit bull. But I've heard many survivors say that their big dog is what made them feel safe. My big dog is what made me feel safe. Positive reinforcement training. I put this on here specifically because dogs and cats and animals are also experiencing this abuse. They are part of the abuse physically. They're yelled at just as much. The last thing that we need is somebody to be really hands-on with an animal that has just been abused. We know that, but on top of that, now you're letting the survivor see something like that. So positive reinforcement training. Understand state regulations and statutes are different in every state. So wherever state you're in, look up your state statutes. Co-housing. My Dog is My Home did a really wonderful conference, and I think they're doing it again this year, next year, sorry, 2025, on co-housing. I think co-housing is the way forward because that way we don't have to separate people from their pets. Think about single pets. Yeah.
Just gonna really quick. And we're make an announcement for the time. It is 45. We are going to let the Maddie's call stay open. If you have that time to share with us, we're gonna let you keep going, okay?
Okay, this is my last slide.
Oh, you're good, you're good.
Think about single people with pets. A lot of the housing that the domestic violence place I'd offered to, where it's actual housing, priority came to people with children. But what happens if you're a single person with pets? Relocation. There are times where you had to completely relocate the animal out of state because the abuser would not stop. There is a reason why the building I worked in was behind bulletproof glass. And we had in our workbook on how to protect ourselves, talked about how being a hostage, because that's how desperate abusers can get. Okay. Pet fees, just thinking about what if they just need to pay their pet deposit and we can help them out with that. Fostering programs with proper training. When I was at the Oklahoma Humane Society, shout out to Brittany who does that program there. They have a fostering program with the Palomar Family Justice Center. Phenomenal program. That's another option we can have instead of just being in a kennel, right? And housing, consider the length of stay. This is a really big one because one of the cats that I saw at our DV place, it was a cat tower, and it was 2 adult cats, and they've been there for months living in this cat tower. And I was like, that's bad for the cats. So we have to consider the cat's well-being too. And I think about this in a trickle effect, right? If we're adding more stress, now it's going to stress out the survivor too, because now their pet's health is deteriorating and they got to take care, and then remember, safety for everybody. Everybody involved needs to focus on safety. So just some really quick, and then we're going to be done. Planning with pets, prove ownership. You have to prove ownership. We know pets are not just property, but legally pets are property. You have to prove that this is your animal. Avoid going to places if you're having this conversation with somebody, avoid going to places where they might recognize the animal. And excluding if you're talking about in a fostering program, you'd want to talk to people about that too. Don't go to the place where that person might be frequented and the abuser could possibly see them. If you have to leave the pet behind, this was actually a suggestion from the National Domestic Violence Hotline, is to consider calling animal control about it. And this is another reason why I think this conversation happen everywhere. Our ACOs already do a lot. Our animal control officers already do a lot. But if we can also make sure we do this, because I'll also tell you, it is probably the most dangerous calls that police officers go on is when they handle domestic violence. Bring extra provisions and medicine. And this is where it's important to have your extra food, and maybe you can have a pet food pantry, because we know if we start switching up food, what's going to happen? Diarrhea. And also, what if they have a specialty diet, right? We want to make sure that we're supporting that. And then talk with family and friends about the situation, because the abuser is going to come crying, I just want to see my dog one more time. And then if a family member or friend is like, oh, and makes them feel bad about it, they might go back. Have the conversation and be like, no, this is it. We're done. I know we don't have a lot of time, but if you had any questions, that's my email address there. If you don't feel comfortable putting it in the Maddie's forum, you can always email me, but I do want to give you one little caveat. I live on the west coast of Florida, and a Category 3 hurricane is going to hit us. So I might disappear for several days because I won't have power or Wi-Fi. But I will get back to you eventually when I do have power and Wi-Fi.
Janelle, I cannot thank you enough. That was so much information, and not just information, like brilliant information in such a tight time frame. Mad skills, mad skills. We do have some great questions in the chat, and definitely a reminder for everyone, if you have to leave, feel free to come back and see the recording later. Thank you so much for hanging out with us a little bit longer to maybe talk about these things. There, just in the chat so far, some amazing transparent sharing of so many people that are in this, have been through this, and increasing their awareness that you can just see coming through the chat. You know, one of the questions was about, are we seeing any correlation to gun ownership and survivors or non-survivors, or relationship to DV? And someone posted an article, so that's certainly some part of conversation we can continue with. There's a
wanna
question
say-
about. Go ahead.
Sorry. If domestic violence, if there's a person experiencing domestic violence in the home and there is a gun in the home, it increases the risk of homicide by 500%. Guns are
Wow.
really easy to pull that trigger. That's why it's also very dangerous for police officers. Sorry,
Okay.
I could talk
No,
about
that was a perfect stat. Like that's it. That hits, right? There's a question about if there's treatment for abusers, and I know that's a whole long conversation. Like
It is.
everything here, we talk so much more about it, but right, just the awareness and that there's therapy and counseling and ways to get through that. And not a lot of people, like you said, they don't go out and say, hey, can't wait to get in an abusive relationship where I'm the abuser. Great. Let's get that going. So it goes back to lots and lots of things, and retraining and self-awareness that there are options, but it's a lot of dedication like everything else. Lucy, I know you took note of a couple other questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. I did some copy paste. I want to make sure I get the words out right and articulate people's context and everything like that. Do you see the parents of the abused person will show them disappointment or shame for leaving the relationship? This is kind of tricky, like loved ones kind of being, I guess it's just, with loved ones being like ashamed of the, the survivor for sort of leaving and that kind of thing. So yeah, if you see any of those types of things.
There's a big cultural aspect of that too, right? In religious aspect, there's some religions where divorce is just shameful. You never divorce, it doesn't matter what. I also will say that there's a lot of people who just don't want to believe that, right? Like their child could be so abusive. They don't want to believe something like that, so they won't believe the person experiencing it. And then also you have to remember master manipulators. So one of the things, a tactic I heard, a lot of tactics, I've heard this several times from survivors, what abusers will do is they'll go to their family and be like, so-and-so's mental health has really been deteriorating lately, and I'm just really concerned about them. Have you guys noticed anything? And they come in as the most caring and wonderful person. So then when that person comes, the survivor comes to them and says, hey, I feel like I'm being gaslit. That abuser already has controlled the narrative. So now they're like, now even that family's questioning, is their mental health deteriorating?
Yeah. Thank you so much. With the we had Jory, I think, asked, what do you advise if someone is unwilling to leave? I have a friend who's currently experiencing DV. She has a cat and she won't take us up on our offer to come stay with us. I don't know what to do to help. Yeah, being on the outside is kind of tricky. What do you recommend there?
Being on the outside is the most trickiest thing to do, especially because it's never going to be your choice. That person at the end of the day has to make that choice. But what I will say for people whose loved ones are experiencing it, this is where I say tune into yourself, because this is a long ride. This is not something that's going to change overnight, and you have to make sure that you are mentally prepared for that and understand to check in with yourself, because if you start getting heightened emotions and you start getting angry at them and frustrated at them, because they're not going to see it. When you're in it, you never see it. On the outside, it's easier to see, right? But on the inside, it's hard. It's so confusing. Their master manipulators have messed with their mentality. So what I would recommend is always keep that offer there. Always have that line of communication. No matter what, I love you, I support you, I'm here for you, no matter what they say back. And you just completely repeat that over and over and over again, so they know that when they're ready, they have someone to reach out to.
It's such a powerful statement in that support. And it goes back to that point you made of like, you're not the hero. That's not your job. And it's such a perfect way to remember if you take nothing away, that they're the one that makes the choice, be the supporter, not the hero. And if you're in that situation, reach out to supporters, because it's going to be a difficult choice to make on your own. And we dropped lots of links in here. We're going to be able to follow all those links up in the forum as well, access to your presentation, which was phenomenal. Janelle, thank you so much. I'm sure we could ask questions forever, but any last words you want to share before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I just want to say, Deborah, I think I said that right. You said they loved my senior pup. That's actually my Dre. So that was my soul dog. And I'm wearing his necklace. He's very dear to me. He's the reason why I was able to survive my trauma. And I love him dearly, and I do everything in his honor.
It was wonderful to hear everyone's talk about how their animals make them feel safe and recognizing how important they are for us. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Feel free to engage, and don't forget to sign up for Maddie's for each week, and we will not see you next week. We do not have a call. We'll see you again the week after. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Janelle. Dr.
Thank you, guys.